Hello to you there, my lovely listener. How the devil are you? I hope you're keeping well. Where's the sun in England? Where is it? It's not out at the moment at this time of the recording, I tell you that. But do you know what? I'm grateful because I've actually been out gardening today and trying to get a cherry blossom tree out of a massive pot that's rotting into an even bigger pot. I don't even know why I'm telling you this. But anyway, today I'm talking to a Scottish medium called Ewan Irvine, whose journey into mediumship began around 18 after the passing of his father, which led to a number of strange paranormal experiences in his family home after his father's passing. And me and Ewan discuss on this conversation about the psychic and mediumistic abilities which were running through his family line all along. We also talk about ghost hunts and all things kind of the paranormal, and I think a lot of people are drawn to that because they're kind of searching to kind of get proof of, is there more to life than we can see? Because I bet you if I stood on the local English high street with a clipboard asking how many people would say that there was perhaps more to life than they, wouldn't know. If I was to say, do you think death is the end? I'm sure most people would say, well, I'm not totally sure. They wouldn't want to rule it out. So there's a lot that we discuss in this conversation, even from the ghostly goings on that used to happen when I was a child in the house that my mediumistic granddad lived in. So I love you, and he's so funny. He made me laugh a lot on this conversation due to the way that he just kind of put things so matter-of-factly. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. This is my conversation with Ewan Irvine. Ewan, it's lovely to have you here on the Soul Sync. Welcome.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a delight. It is a delight. And I think we're going to have a rich conversation because for you, it sounded to me from reading the show notes that this all started for you, your journey of mediumship at the age of 18.
Yes. I think before that, and I always say to people, I did not grow up seeing dead people. That did not happen. What I used to get was that kind of strange sensation or just knowing that something wasn't quite right or something was about to happen. And it usually did. So maybe something happened in family or to people that I knew. It was almost like, I suppose, the psychic in some way. So that was there. And it wasn't really until the age of 18 that everything really kind of took off, if that's the word.
What happened to you at age 18?
Yes, so prior to that, we were, I guess, in a house. We had not long moved into it, maybe a couple of years. And my father passed during that time. And it wasn't until afterwards that a number of strange things started happening. Now, I think there was things connected to the house going back, but I remember the first thing was I had my father's watch and I was wearing that, and I was going out to the garden, and I remember putting it on the kitchen worktop. Went out to the garden, there was only one in, came back in, no watch, it wasn't there. So never really thought too much about it, went up, had a shower, came back down, and there was the watch right in the middle of the worktop. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. But there was a number of other things that happened in the house to different people, etc. And that was, I think, the beginning of, we're living in a haunted house. And starting to realise that up till then, I was fascinated by ghost stories. I was fascinated by the paranormal, the history of towns and cities, but the paranormal had to have some fact and history in them. So then my mother, I think quite accidentally, was invited to go with someone to a spiritualist church. And over the course of a few months, I think she kind of had the odd reading, and she would come back and tell me. And I found it all very interesting, but I had a skeptical hat on. I guess religion and faith to me hadn't really made much sense over the years in childhood. I went to Sunday school, but I think I had too many questions for their liking. So
A curious soul, Ewan.
A curious soul, yes. But with these readings, my mother came back and told me different things that had been said. So there was an open day. And funny enough, we just had one in our church yesterday, but there was an open day and it was offering mini readings. So I went along with my mother and I decided I was going to have one of those mini readings. So I went to my mini reading and I sat like that. Do you know that? I'm not giving anything away.
Yes, you're here to prove it to me, and I'm going to sit here until otherwise.
Yeah. You're going to have to prove this to me, and it better be good, kind of thing for me to believe. And it was, because the medium never knew that I was related to my mother. She hadn't given my mother a reading. But the first thing she said was, I have a gentleman here, and his name is John. That was my father's name. But Mr. Skeptical here, John, it's a common name.
Yes.
So my wee little mind was thinking that. And then things got interesting. And she said, he's pointing to his heart, but it's not his heart that took him. My father died from breast cancer. Very unusual in a male. And at that time, very uncommon as well. So my interest was getting a little bit, whoa, there's something going on here. And she mentioned various things. And some of what she mentioned, I never found out till later on. There was a lot that she mentioned. Some I had to ask my mother. I didn't know. And then I found out, oh, this was true. She mentioned that I had an aunt who she said dabbled in things. Now, to me was, what was this dabbling? Is it witchcraft? Is it something? It wasn't until a number of years later when she passed and we were clearing out the house that hidden away was something like the 1950 Book of Fortune Telling or something. And my mother had always said that she understood one of the aunts kind of dabbled in tea leaf readings and fortune stuff. So we realised that was the case. She also said I had a great-grandmother that was a medium. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, don't think so. Until I found out that my father's grandmother, she read the flames and the fire for people.
How interesting.
Now, that I didn't find till later on. But everything she gave me, and some of it was quite private information at the time, made me think, how does she know this? What's going on here? It was her final bit that took me mostly by surprise when she said, and you have that. She never called it, I never want to call it a gift. But I think that's the word she used. And she said, and you'll be doing this in a few years. And I remember thinking that's the point, that no, everything else I'm fine with, not that bit. But I remember going home and it was one of these things, I couldn't quite get it off my mind. I was replaying that reading. How did she know? How did she know? And then a few weeks later, they were doing a kind of, well, I went to a couple of the services and everything, but they were doing a workshop, and the workshop's on the psychic, and something just kept saying to me, you need to go to this, you need to go to this. So along I went. And it was really from there that things started to make sense. More of that intuition growing up, what had happened at 18, that proof of survival that we do go on. It just really all started to make sense. It took 18, 19 years for that to happen, but it did.
We'll be right back.
Hello, my darlings. I'm launching a brand new monthly newsletter. Think of it as SoulSync in your inbox once a month. Or we'll be like pen pals. I'll tell you what I'm up to in my mediumship, what I've been doing over the month. There'll be free meditation downloads, events. Sign up jasonpaulmedium.com down at the bottom of the homepage, and I'll see you there. It's interesting. Well, as you're saying that, I myself was very sensitive as a young boy, and I couldn't quite place my finger on why I didn't feel I fitted in, but I knew that I didn't. And it wasn't until, like you, I got drawn into the paranormal, and even for years going to ghost hunts and seeing ghostly paranormal things was what kind of drew me in. But really, I was looking for life after death. But it's actually quite funny. I think it was all those ghost hunts, actually, that sort of at the beginning, I was sort of looking at the spirit world almost through a lens of fear at times. And it's hardly surprising when I'd be running around chasing ghosts until 3 a.m. in some respects. So you go.
And I'm older than you, so I go back to the days when we didn't have the ghost hunts and things. What we had was the subject of ghosts and the houses and haunted houses. And when my parents were both alive, they used to like to go around some of the stately homes. And of course, my first question through the door is, "Where's the ghost? Have you got a ghost? What's the ghost?" And I had this absolute fascination about ghosts. I didn't know what I would do if I saw one, but at that time there was something really, it was quite interesting. It was all mixed up in the history of things. And of course, Edinburgh, as time went on and the greater the interest in the paranormal, Edinburgh, you know, we talk about being one of the most haunted cities in the world. But for me, these stories have to have fact in them. It's got to go back and have fact. These are folk that lived. And that's what I always find fascinating.
What do you think's happening when, or what do you feel's happening when people go and have these kind of experiences? Because how does that, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're sensing, because you're looking at the notes here, you've gone to a whole range of different places here on the search for the paranormal, but why is a soul coming through? And how does that, you know, is that person stuck? You know, what's going on there? Do you believe when people are seeing these manifestations or spirits scaring them? Because, you know, to a lot of people, you know, my belief is soul dies, passes to the other side, and it's all light and love and so on.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the stuck. I think, and I always term it, you know, and this is where I'm coming from. I always say, and I remember someone asking me, why do they bother with us here when they're over there? And I remember quite simply turning around, I don't know where it came from, and I said, because they're nosy. And I think that's quite true. And if we head over there, or when we head over there, don't we want to keep a little eye on who's in our house, who's inhabiting it, what are our family doing? Don't we want to follow that in some way?
But yes, I would like to think so.
Very often when we do these investigations and things and go to these places, it's in some way we're connecting with those who lived, they worked there, maybe coming through to kind of let us know a little bit about them and everything. And I think there's a way of connecting with the history of a building, of an area. I mean, we talk about the walls kind of soaking history up in many ways. And it's there's something about touching a wall even and just allowing that history to come forward. And I think that's what we're doing. So I'm not kind of caught up in the whole stuck theory.
That's interesting because I guess we are nosy, aren't we? I guess we do want to probably see who's in our house, especially, my house at the moment. I've been there a long time and it's quite territorial. I might want to come back and have a look. Yeah. So when you approach these kind of buildings over the years and people get you out because they're having these kind of, experiences going on that perhaps, they're not wanting to, would you say that you tend to find your experiences, if someone's seeing and experiencing this themselves in some way, they're awakening to the spirit world? And
I think sometimes, the cases, you kind of got to split what you would call maybe more the house situations away from the more general old hotel, the classes, underground Edinburgh, etc. But it's always, when someone contacts you, it's always starts off very much with, okay, you'll think I'm crazy and it's taken me months to contact you. I'm not too sure I really believe in all this spooky psychic stuff, but this has been going on for so long, I just want to get to the bottom of it. And you'll get someone telling you roughly what's been happening and also saying, well, I was hoping it was maybe just the pipes or a draft or maybe it's something else. And I always think, okay, that's fine. If we can narrow it down, and if it is the pipes, we've got to go in with we've got to go in with that logical.
So you get your brief, you're there, Ewan, in your Ghostbusters machine, about to go out on call.
Yes.
Where do we go from there?
So if we were to go into any situation, now gone are the days when I'll spend a whole night right through to the morning in a haunted location. I'm too old for that now. I can't do it. I like my sleep. So it's shorter versions. But if it's, for instance, if somebody called us from a house and it's about that, we would firstly say to them, like, yeah, we'll come out. If we find it's something logical, brilliant, because that puts their mind at rest completely. That's it solved. We've got to the bottom of it. We don't go out to a house with like the whole lot of ghost busting equipment or anything like that. I know it's there. I know it has its uses. We would simply go out, maybe 2 or 3 of us. It's very much, okay, we've looked at everything. And I think the medium's job very much, if there is something, then it's connecting and finding who it was or who it is. And if we can do that, very often it's not somebody scary coming through that's terrorizing the house occupants or wanting them out. Generally, no. And I'm thinking, in one case going back, it was this is going way back, but there was a couple that were experiencing a lot, and then I think our mum's ring, she opened the box and the ring had gone or something. It then reappeared later. She accused the other half of doing something with it, and it all got quite.
Oh no! You was walking in the middle of a domestic as a result.
Yeah, no. It was quite calm then, but I think there was also pots and pans rattling and everything. And we looked at the whole logical and realised, no, there was something else going on. And usually mediumship, I just remember, I can't remember, it was either our mum or our grandmother started coming forward. And the reason all this had started was she was concerned about the relationship and what had been going on, and she wanted them to be together, etc. But everything was going wrong. They weren't even talking to each other, etc. And actually, I think they then realised or thought about things and everything just calmed down.
So it almost feels like kind of by that person being acknowledged in some way and identified and their, messages being heard, that was enough.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's somebody going back that maybe stayed in the house, etc. I do have this belief that when things, when we start doing structural works or things in the house, that can somehow cause a lot of, can I say, disturbances? That's the word there. So we have that. But generally, it's getting to the bottom of something. And if there's an explanation in whatever form, I think it really does kind of alleviate somebody's concerns. They know what it is.
Well, it can be. I remember distinctly, my granddad was a medium, and I hear stories from my mum where they grew up in house in London, and as they were growing up there would be things going on all the time, plant pots spinning, things going missing, and eventually it was enough that my nan said to my granddad, we're moving, and that's what we're doing, because it was too much for them.
One of the things I found, I put together a talk on it because I found it fascinating, came across it quite accidentally, but there was the famous ghost that was seen in the staircase, one of the most photographed, or one of the most widely publicised photograph going back decades. We're talking about the 1940s here. And it was in Rainham Hall, I think. And at that time, it was taken by Country Life magazine, who were only out to do a feature on the house, but actually caught the photo of this ghost.
Oh, wow.
And one of the newspapers at the time, took that picture, and then they decided to ask up and down the country. And we've got to bear in mind it was a different language then, and there was much more of a class system. And they said they were appealing to members from basically the illiterate, they said, right up to the reverend gentlemen and magistrates, etc., to find their experience of ghosts, not those that we see or refer to in the Christmas Carol that have the clunking chains and everything. It's not that. It was their stories, and their stories as they had heard them or seen them, experienced them. And I think they got about 4,000 replies. And this was made into various books in the 1940s, to which I've now got 2 of them. I'm working on the other 2. And it's amazing, some of these stories. And a lot are about the war. And for instance, one story is where a lady looks out her window, she sees her brother coming up the path, and her brother talks to somebody at the gate, which she verifies later. She heads down, he's not there, only to get a telegram a few days later to say that he had died in action at the very time she'd seen him on the path.
Wow. What a story. You've been, you can write a book about this, you, and all these different stories here about Scotland and what the goings on over the years.
And I think history as well, the other thing, we talk about everything going back, and we talk about witchcraft, which very much not just in the UK, but through Europe as well when we go back, and those condemned for witchcraft. But one of the things behind it, and I try to get back to this in some of the talks and events and things, is that these were human beings.
Yes.
These were not witches as class. They were healers. They were those that, could heal, but with the slightest quarrel or somebody didn't like them.
That's the saddest thing about it, isn't it? The fact they were healers.
Mm-hmm.
That really is sad.
And it's interesting as well because it was, the philosophy at the time was where magic can be used to heal, magic can be used to harm. Mm-hmm. So that was the way that if you get someone just as out of a quarrel, they would then be accused of liaising with the devil, etc. And very much, no trial and jury. They were very much condemned from the start.
Well, you bring up something there interesting, which is fear, and how fear can be used. It can hold us. Always one of the ultimate weapons, isn't it? That can be used to control us. You put something here that jumped out to me on the form, which is that I think as we go on this journey as mediums and how people look at mediums, they sometimes think that they put mediums on this pedestal where it's all light and love. But you put here on your form that you kind of live in between a place of, fear and then to the other extreme of love. And that's the way that you walk through life.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And I think very much, we talk about the light and love and that connection with spirit. I still don't like the dark.
No, me neither.
I'm terrified of the dark. I've always got to have a light on. That's always been the case. I remember back to my youngest of days, and there was a little night light on the wall. It had a wee moon and it had stars. And I think there's something about that dark. I would not like to go into any haunted or supposed haunted place and sit in one of the rooms myself. I can't do that.
Isn't that interesting?
To have somebody with me. Now, I don't know why that is the case, because I do remember one time in a very old house waking up and seeing the outline of a figure of an old man just staring down. And all I remember thinking was, I'm too tired at the moment to think about this. I'll deal with it in the morning.
It's a very matter-of-fact way of dealing with it.
Well, so I didn't go running. I just think, it was that kind of no. And I remember asking the next again day, and that figure has been seen in the room and things. So I thought that was interesting, looking back on it, that no, I didn't go running when I first saw a ghost, etc. But I do not like the dark. And there's something about being, fearful. I think we all are, what could be there. So there is, and I think, I think most folk or a lot of folk would be like that because there's still a bit of the unknown and everything.
Would you say that your journey of becoming a medium has now made you totally now not scared of death?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so as well. Be a bit worrying if it hadn't, wouldn't it?
It'd be a bit worrying if it doesn't, but I also think that very often the proof comes through other people's eyes as well, through the stories that they tell of what they've experienced. And then we have our own proof as well. And I've had that, I've had both parents past, relatives past, friends, and I think there's something as well that when you start getting on in years and you start to experience where others of the same generation kind of head up there, or that suddenly you find, as someone said to me when a last family member passed, he said, you know what? I said, what? I said, you get to that point, it's you next. And I remember thinking, thanks very much.
Yeah. Well, No, do you know what though? I can see what they were saying, but yes, thank you for that. That's just what I want to hear.
But also there is that knowledge that, well, it's not the end.
It's the beginning.
Someone asked me, would you want to come back? And I thought, no, that's a separate question. I'm not too sure I would want to come back.
I'm not sure. I think I'd need a good long break first. Give me at least not a millennia, but maybe a century. I don't think I'd be in any rush to come back.
Yeah, I think I'd just be happy just staying there. I just think, Earth, I think, is too difficult at times.
It is. And I think we're all down here to learn the lesson. And I often think to myself, with the way my 20s was, I think when my soul was there, deciding on what soul contracts and lessons it wanted to learn, it was probably like, oh, who wants to go through trauma in their 20s? Yep, me. Who wants to experience this? Yep, me. And someone, almost the other soul, saying, Jason, are you sure you want to sign up to so much? Put your hand down now. You've signed up to enough. But I don't think I would want to rush back down here. I honestly don't think I would, because, I think the world is in a very tense place at the moment. And I don't think I would want to come back from the loveliness of the other world. At least that's my thoughts at the moment. Maybe when I get back up there, I'll change my mind, Ewan.
And I think it is very tense, but I've also noticed a bit of a difference. And I think I've very much experienced that when we had the pandemic. Now, the pandemic was a horrible, terrible thing. But there was something from it that made people maybe look at the self, maybe the spiritual self. What else is there to life? Because at first we had that fear and that natural fear that, we might not make it. Might not make it through this pandemic, and lots of people tragically didn't. There was always, you were suddenly a little bit kinder, I think, as well during that time. But there's something about that spirituality sense that people are looking for something a little bit more, even than that work-life balance, looking at things where, we can, expand our knowledge and in good ways. And I think it is that spiritual self.
What do you think it means to spiritualize the self? What does it mean to you?
I remember someone asking this, and they talk about the word spiritualism. And what was the most important part of that word. And some folks said spirit, some folks said spiritual, and then we said, what about the wee ism at the end? The ism, the ISM, what's that got to do with it? You can break that down, ism, ISM, inside me, spiritual inside me. And I think that is different to each and every one of us. There's no rights, no wrongs to how we feel in that journey of life. We talk about the grieving process, for instance. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's something we've got to go through. We've got to... It's where we have all those questions, all these emotions as we do in life. And it's through the good times and it's through the bad times. It's something to do within here. It's the spirit inside each of us. How does it grow? How do we weather the storm? How does it laugh? How does it cry? How does it protect us, hinder us? Everything there. I think that's the spiritual self. Some folk might call it the soul. Some folk might call it the intuition. I think it's all the same.
It is, and I think all these different names are sometimes what complicates it for people. They don't even realise what they're trying to look for, which is, as you said, well, I call it the soul personally, but even for a while, it took me a long time to work out, well, what is my soul? That's a whole other story. We could go down so many rabbit holes with that alone.
Yep. We're at the end of each of our lives, we're all going to carry out baggage. but that's it. That's it gone.
Yeah.
So we.
I almost feel that the more that you live your life in a way that is through a lens of love and how much you touch people, those ripples of love, that's what really matters, I feel, when you go back to the spirit world. And I feel it's the only thing that really matters. Everything else is kind of irrelevant, really. I wanted to ask you, because a big part of what you do now is about helping other people awaken and develop their own mediumship. And I know that you do a workshop that's turning up the volume. I like the sound of that. Who doesn't want to turn up the volume on their sensitivity? But even so, tell us about that and about, how you help people to unfold their mediumship.
We're looking at in that there is quite a lot, but we're using the psychic to start off. We're looking at the intuition, and some folk might ask what that psychic, that intuition is, and it can start off with, when I say to folk, you walk into a house for the first time, whether you're renting it or buying it, you're not even in the first room. It either feels right or it feels wrong. Something about that intuition when we meet folk. And then we take it up a little. You know how we people watch, or we're in an airport and we look at someone and we just seem to pick up something about their life, etc. It's that psychic that we have. And then we can use that. We take it into different things like the colour, the aura. We can look at somebody's life going back, the present, and maybe that little bit about the future there as well. But at some point, we take it up to the contact with the other side of life and bring through those that they want to come through and give us their message. And that message that they give has got to be one we know it's them. So of course, the examples going back, which we look at some things where it's someone say, well, they're saying their name begins with a P. Well, they're not going to say that. They're going to give us their name.
They're not going to play sort of Guess Who with us.
But equally, we as mediums, we get into a bit of a comfort zone. And where that starts, we give that one message and we've got it right. And then someone will say, can you do another message? And it's like, no. I just do one message. I don't do two. And we get into that kind of comfort thing where we get bits of information or our various information from them. And that's it. But there's a lot more to it, And I think we forget that we can ask questions of them. It's not just one way. We've got to meet with them. So part of that turning up the volume is where we have that time to connect with spirit and ask them what they need from us, but also ask spirit perhaps what we need from them to take our mediumship up. Because those that come forward, what was their eulogy of life? What we all think about, when it's our time to pass and our funeral, what would we want said about us? How did we grow up, friends, work, etc. That's what we want them to come through with. And perhaps that message at the end, sometimes they don't, sometimes it's just that, well, they're just coming through to say hello. But we need to have that proof. The turning up the volume is just something that brings the music into it. So one of the things we can use is music, which when we're in a large group and play about music, we can be directed straight away to someone through spirit that, whoa, okay, I know I'm going to yourself. And that just sometimes allows us that connection and that better connection.
The amount of times I've used music in kind of classroom type scenarios with my mediumship, and there's something about music and the tracks, and I can think of a number of occasions where we've done exercises where there would be every track would be given a number, and you would pick a number, and then you would do a reading from the track. And every time I've ever done that exercise, it just amazes me, the intelligence of the spirit world, because it always works, and there's always a relevance and a real reason symbolically on why they've come through on that song, I've tended to find myself, which always blows my mind.
Yeah, and I think there's all different methods that we can use, or should I say spirit can, will use. And even, in a church service, it's not just about the mediumship, it's about the philosophy that they bring in. It's about the hymn or the song that has been chosen, or the reading. Everything kind of fits in.
And it should do, and if it doesn't, then it means that maybe the service hasn't been spirit infused enough.
Yeah,
because the philosophy, even, that's a big part of it, and I think that's what's missing a lot of the time, is good, strong spirit infused philosophy.
Yeah. And I think that is very, very important. And sometimes often more important than the mediumship, because the mediumship, you'll get round, hopefully, some people. And I think you've got to, a message to someone has got to be a meaningful message. So you are with them for maybe 4-5 minutes. And you've got to stay at that time. You can't just say, I've got your mother here, boom, 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 and that's it, and move on. Because I'd be sitting there thinking, oh, that was quick.
Yeah, well, there needs to be a depth to it. Someone's mum has come through to say something to their daughter or their son, and you want to be touched by that. And not just, here's your mum, she wore a beige top, she wants to say she loves you, goodbye. That's not going to touch the person, is it?
So you'll probably get round maybe about 7 or 8 people in a service, and I think that is right, and each one can be a meaningful message, hopefully. But the philosophy, everybody can take a little bit from that philosophy, and it's everybody, and then even the reading, the hymn, the song. And I remember someone saying, oh, it's great how you must all communicate just to get all the service ready, as if we're all on the phone to each other the week before to say, right. And no, it doesn't quite work like that. We just turn up, but somehow it just seems to be...
It just works, and it blows my mind that you can turn your attention to the spirit world in a reading, and never once do they stand you up. There's always someone there that wants to come through, and it always begs the question for me on just how spontaneous is this, really? They've known, and I think they've been preparing for that moment at that particular time for, maybe weeks, maybe months before, maybe even years. Who knows? And we'll never know until we get up there.
Yeah,
that's kind of the beauty of it, isn't it? So in all this time that you've been helping people unfold their mediumship, what do you tend to find, and I guess yourself, is one of the biggest challenges people have when deciding to tread the path of, wanting to explore their mediumship?
I think there's a lot of terrible training and advice out there, for a start. For me, and I can only go by my thoughts here, is that whether it's training, whether it's awareness, philosophy, is to really go with, I guess, a church or a centre that really does that. And at the end of the day, it's not high cost either. It's a reasonable cost to people to go and experience that, and you're with other folk as well here. I think one of the drawbacks, and I've certainly seen it a lot, is some folk will say, right, or they've been told they've got medium skills or psychic skills, and within 6 weeks the website's up, the business cards are written, that's it.
They're
or
off out the paddock.
exactly, or you have courses that say make you a medium in a few months, and I usually think, oh, really?
Well, it's a long journey, and it's a
Yeah.
journey that never stops. I don't think you
And
ever stop developing.
It's a
it, do you?
long journey where you have the ups and you have the downs. And I remember going back, the first ever mistake I made, which was a big, big one. And I've made mistakes since, and actually before that as well. But I remember at the very beginning, I went and did a church. Went brilliantly. Absolutely brilliant. Everyone took the message, and I came away on that high and thought, you've got it. You can do it. A week later, I went to a church, and I just wanted the floor to swallow me up because no one could take anything. My links were just all over the place. There must have been a pool of sweat on the floor.
God, I could just feel it myself in being in that situation.
And I remember coming away, and I remember sending a thought up and said, right, what happened, guys? And I heard this voice as clear as day come back that said, you got too big for your boots, son.
And how did you respond to that?
Never, ever forgotten that.
But they obviously made you want to make sure that you knew that, that we need to get that message through to you. Yeah. And what was you like the time after that then? A slightly more grounded, sitting there wishing,
I think it was a bit
praying.
More grounded when I realised that, no, I have to work with them. They're the ones that do this. It's when, folk will thank you for a message and things, and you kind of got to truthfully say, it's not me, it's them. We talk about being just that telephone in the middle, and that I think is it.
The hardest bit is for me, and probably where I'm at with my mediumship, which is just starting to get to the point now of going out there and doing platform after 4 years of developing this. But the hardest bit is getting out the way. It is the hardest bit, I find. It's like, Jason, stop meddling. Stop trying to interpret it. Stop trying to, get in the way. And it's very difficult. And it's taken me a long time to be able to not want to meddle. But at the end of the day, you don't know someone's story. And what's even the point of interpreting it? Or, even going into your mind, because it's not going to make sense because it's not your story.
And that was another lesson I learned quite early on as well, because I remember doing a reading for somebody, and it was their son that came through. He showed me his grave, but he showed me all these cans of Coca-Cola on it. My wee brain was saying, you cannot give this. You cannot give this, that maybe somebody's thrown a whole sack of, had a party or thrown all these Coca-Cola cans over a grave. I thought, this is terrible. But I remember just sending that thought, and they said, no, you've got to say this. So, of course, me, much younger at the time, said, well, they're saying, my voice went lower into that little whisper, ready to run. But she said his passion, or not, but he just always drunk Coca-Cola. And when anyone went along to visit his grave, they would leave a can of Coca-Cola. And that made me realise straight away it isn't our message to interpret. As soon as the brain gets in the way, or
you lose the link instantly, and it's very difficult. And I found this to be very much the case in my development, not to do that. I've had to really work hard and train myself, because in any other aspect of your life, you get something. Well, the first thing you do is it goes up into your head. And for me, that mainly happens now when I get out of the flow. As soon as the rhythm of the reading stops or the energy of the spirit world starts to drop, because I've got in my head, that's it. You know, I'm not going to get anything then. And it's having to get back into that energy. And it's just like anything. It's like practice. You've just got to, but it's difficult because mediumship, it is one of those things where someone sits in front of you at the beginning and you're getting those and things aren't going your way, or like you said, you're doing a demonstration where you're wanting the floor to swallow you up. You know, you have to ask yourself the question, why am I still doing this? And I think for anyone that really should authentically be living their life as a medium, it is their calling, it is their gift, it is what they should be doing. You just can't leave it alone. You're drawn sort of back into it. I don't know if that's what you experience yourself, Ewan.
I think a lot of folk, I stood back a little bit when I looked after my mother because she had dementia. And I still did little bits and pieces, but I really kind of took a step back. And it wasn't until afterwards that I went back on that journey again. And I think a lot of people do. You know, there's some that just stay on that journey. Some may step off for a while, but come back. There's something there that always brings us back on that track.
I feel for me, what keeps bringing me back is knowing it's the eventuality that one day I'm going to be within that world, and I want to know as much about the world as I can before I'm in it. And I often think that people who know more and more the truth of what life is, I believe that their transitions are the easiest because they're not having to go to the other side and sort of, you know, realise that everything they thought in their life wasn't as it is. So, do you know what? It's been a very rich conversation, Ewan. You're a very interesting chap, and the passion for the other world just oozes from you. So do us the honour then and leave us on a final thought today.
A final thought. I guess it's that final thought that at the end of the day, you know, love in all its form never dies. It's always there. And that love we have for someone when they were here, again, never dies. It's still there. And to know that the folk that we have lost, they're still with us. They're still proud of us. They're still hopefully sending us signs. And we can carry on their memory knowing that they're there, knowing that we're never alone. But I think that has that power. That has that power to see us all as humans move forward, knowing that there's something else there, that this isn't the end. How can it be?
Well, I always feel that surely the work that we do is all about helping people to live a fuller life, a life through less of a lens of fear and more through a lens of love at the end of the day. But Ewan, thank you for coming on to the Soul Sync. It's been a blast to have you.
It's been a very, very quick hour. It's just kind of flown by.
It has indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Soul Sync, I have just launched a brand new newsletter that I'm going to be sending out every single month. In it will contain things like free links to meditations, some of which I've just started working on. I'll be releasing videos and I'll be telling you what I'm up to in regards to my mediumship. To sign up, just go to jasonpaulmedium.com, go right to the bottom of the homepage and sign up just there.